right, welcome everybody. And in this episode today, we're going to be talking about process, people, and the path to operational excellence. I am joined by Madeline Vinson, which is the founder and process architect at Process Architect, which is the name of the company, a consulting firm dedicated to helping property management companies build scalable, repeatable systems from team empowerment and tenant satisfaction to AI-driven process design, technology architecture, strategic automation. Madeline shares how thoughtful process design transforms operation and elevates the entire organization. I think I don't even do it justice by describing it that way. I will footnote this to say that I believe that Madeline is one of the rising stars of our industry, and this is a great opportunity to get to know her and understand what makes her so special. So let's kick it off. Madeline, thanks for joining the podcast, and tell us a little bit about, your origin story. Like, how did you get into this?
Thank you. Your words are too kind. It makes me blush a little bit. I love being here. I love talking to people in the industry. So thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I started as a property manager. I've shared my story for a little while, but for anybody that doesn't know, I come from my parents' property management company in East Tennessee in Knoxville. Go Vols. My mom is broker owner. She still runs and operates it today. They started with their own portfolio. They owned and operated about 250 doors themselves. It was building them in the spreadsheet, and that was our world for a long time. We went from that, implemented some software, some tools. I kept my mom alive. That was my job. Intern was the official role, but it was email management and making sure she remembered to eat lunch. That was my day to day. It turned into a little bit more when in 2019 we decided to start managing for third-party partners. So we became, more of a typical property management company. What made them unique, though, is a lot of their clients that they onboarded were their investor friends. So even though they were onboarding one owner, they could be adding 50 to 200 doors at a time. And so from 2019 to end of 2021, they went from 250 doors to over 1,000. And it was explosive. Amazing. It was chaotic. I don't know how any of us survived it. But on the flip side of that, by the time we stabilized, we had a great team. We had fantastic systems and processes. We found, the power of automation and unlocking, being able to keep a lean team of A+ players that allowed us to be really focused on tenant and owner success and satisfaction rather than just, the day-to-day grind of rent collection and lease renewals. By the time I left the company to start this full-time, I was over all owner relationships and had a team of 7 that I led for residents and leasing. So I've seen a little bit of everything. I've done the inspection walks. I've done the security deposit processing. I've done the leasing and the application processing. I've been a little bit all over the place, but I now do this full time. We do system implementation for tools like Aptly or Lead Simple or any other partner out there, Monday.com, more generic ones. And that's our whole world. We love it.
It's amazing. Sometimes when I see people getting into what you're doing now, which is solution consulting and implementation, they have only been a property manager, for example. And so they understand the property manager's lingo. Like you said, I've done an inspection. I've dealt with owners and they understand that. But I think what's really unique about you too is because you had this amazing, strong, ambitious, role model, which is your mother who ran, and still continues to run her business. You were inherently very curious about not just the property management business, but to actually get interested in process architecture. And, I remember when I was a kid dating myself, sorry, but there was a movie called Gun Ho. It was about the US car manufacturing versus Japan and how they used Kaizen and they just they basically beat the US at building cars when Detroit was where it was all at. And their whole philosophy was around process and you're only as strong as your weakest link. Process architecture isn't exactly a really common career path, but like, how did your background get you interested in this? Like, when did the light bulb hit you when you're like, whoa, we should be investing in this? Was it something you saw out of the industry, or is it something you were just seeing in the business?
Yeah, my parents had a unique view of how they ran their company, primarily because they wanted time freedom. I and my four biological siblings, we were all homeschooled our whole life. So my mom, while she was running her business, she was also managing our education for a
My
lot of it.
God, it's
She was
crazy.
a stay-at-home mom before that, and so part of just the roots of how they built their business was this has to be lean. It has to be able to operate without a lot of work from us, right? And for a long time, that was not the truth, but that was the goal, right? So there were they whether it was in the beginning or even as recently as a couple months ago, if they ever had a change of staff or things like that, they didn't look to just backfill that role. They wanted to see how they could enable it with tech. My brother actually just posted a case study on it. They don't answer the phone anymore. They actually have a straight to voicemail phone tree at all times. You can go look at that on his LinkedIn, but it's I think that's the roots. I realized that there was a space for me. Actually, when my mom in a presentation, she referred to me as her process architect from stage because she was kind of telling their story. And after the presentation, people came up to me and were like, "Can you help us?" And I realized that people needed this. They didn't have the time, they didn't have the capacity or the skills to implement the software or the processes they were going for. I tell people like I got into this for the little guy, for the people that maybe you're still within your first 150 doors and having a CTO on staff is not an option. And so that's where process architect comes in, is to help people. I say, like, we help people take their first vacation. That's our goal.
That's so cool. It's like you're telling me this story, and it's the parallels with our careers are so similar. I remember getting into the family business because our family owns and operates real estate too. We did a teeny bit of third party management, but not much. But I remember distinctly getting into the business to help and seeing the chaos and
Mm-hmm.
how it affected our ability to do things, and also my mom's life, who actually never actually got that vacation that you're talking about. She was just always just so in it.
Yeah.
It was the foundation of understanding the challenges that they were having that prompted us to build Propertyware. It was built for my family business, and different era, but similar kind of
Yeah.
vibe, which was like a lot of different software that they were bouncing between, and it didn't work very well, and people weren't doing their jobs, and a lot of like lost customer service through poor communication and things that weren't ever getting done correctly. So it's interesting, and I call it like the founder's itch, right? It's as a tech company, venture capitalists love to see you like go tackle a problem that you fully understand. So you definitely understood this problem, but then you come into this world and you're implementing tech and you're getting your hands in all sorts of tech, right? So tell us about what process architecture means to you. When a property management company comes to you, what does a typical engagement look like for you? Because I got to imagine in today's world, back in the day, it was like property management software. That was it. But
Right.
it's a different world now. So how do you approach it?
Yeah. So it's really important to me that when we talk through processes, we're talking to the people that actually run them. I joke, like, for the last couple of years before I left my parents' company, my mom was not allowed in our process software because she was not the one running the processes. It was our team, right? It was my team. So I obviously our primary contact is with the broker owner, and a lot of times we're talking to a person who had a similar, that founder's itch, like they had a goal and a dream and they wanted to start this business, and so our desire is to execute their dream of creating magic in their business. But the conversations we're having are usually with their number two, their number four, their front desk, their maintenance coordinator, right? We never build a process we don't fully understand. So we're going to get things documented before we ever touch any buttons or code or anything. We will work through on an org chart level if they don't have an org chart. I've not yet delved into helping people build their org charts, but it's definitely like a, hey, you should get this in place, right? And you know, here's another consultant, or here's some AI tools to help you do this. Because what typically happens is someone will say, well, you know, Bill does this, and then Mary does this, and Bob does this, right? And we're like, well, what if Bill leaves, right? What happens then? And that usually allows people to see outside of their current situation and think more forward facing of, you know, the what if of, you know, if someone decides to leave, if someone gets promoted, how do we backfill their role without it being a jilt in the system? So that's step one. Beyond that, we talk through desired outcomes. So, you know, we have the front end, we know the day to day, this is what actually the work looks like. What do we want it to look like? Whether we're trying to tackle days on market, owner communications, turn time. We've seen a lot of people look after ideal, like, you know, the 5-day turn, that goal of having a shorter turn time. If I don't know the outcome, we're not going to build the process that the team wants, because if I'm not building with, you know, a due date in place and backing it up from there, the rest of the process is not going to matter because we're not accomplishing the goal in the first place. That's kind of the snippet of how we think about it. I could go into more detail, but that's what comes to mind first.
Well, I love a couple things I'll say back, which is you have to earn the access to the problem by getting the owner of the business to give you the thumbs up, but all the hard work and the meaningful work is done by the people who do the work. Mm-hmm. And we see this in tech too. You know, it's like you've got an ambitious CEO who says, this is what we want to do. And then they kind of ram it down into the organization. And some people don't want that. And they push back because it's threatening to have to learn something new or not have any help to get something new done. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen is so critical when you want to go and attack, you know, business transformation, is unless, like you said, you have a CTO, which nobody really can afford these days at a small to mid-sized business level. You have to start leveraging either your most talented person in the company, which then you have to ask yourself, like, is that the best use of their time to pull them out and go work on this? But of course, they can't not be involved and have it built in a vacuum either, because you need the feedback and you need to know what they want and what they see. So I fully resonate with what you're saying here. Now, follow-up question would be like, what is an ideal place that you see a client where they're all of a sudden like, it's the right time to go do this. It's the right time to invest in building out your process. Like, is it a door count? Is it a place in the trajectory of a business? Like, when does it make sense to do this?
That's a good question. I think the first answer that I had when you started to ask it was more of a seasonal thing, like because we'll talk to people in January and say, you know, come back in September or that kind of thing. I could get into that, but on a bigger picture, I do think my answer revolves around staff count. I have seen people try and implement when it is them and one other, or them and a VA. And what I actually have experienced is people have the most trouble managing themselves when no one is holding them accountable for using the software that they're paying for. So I really love working with teams when there's at least 3 people that are working below the broker owner, because that's usually a self-reliant team at that point, and the broker gives more oversight. Anything beyond that, and you probably are looking at a tool as some level of overkill. You could call it future planning, but I have found that in most scenarios, because you're usually dealing with a smaller door count at that time too, the team is like, you know, it's just me, myself, and I. Why do I have to live in this this tool? I've seen the most success if you have at least 3.
It's also fascinating because I've seen over my experience, like it was really common when people signed up for Propertyware back in the day. It's like, I have 5 doors now, but I'll have 1,000 by next year. And you hear that a lot.
Right.
And some people actually pulled it off. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember they were they were kind of their own breed. But now that I've had a lot of time to kind of observe over a few decades what the trend has been, I'm curious your take on it, is that there are certain people who go in with a very concrete understanding of what they want and how they want to execute it. And future planning does make sense for them because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to hire 3 people right away. I just need to find them. And some
Absolutely.
people who are like, well, when I finally hit this milestone, then I can invest a little bit more. There's a saying that I actually despise that goes around in the property management circles, which is like, nobody ever chose this to be their career. And I actually don't like that saying because
Yeah.
I chose this to be my career. I fully embrace that this is where I want to spend my time, and I find it to be really rewarding because I feel like real estate is such an important attribute of any economy and any culture. It's like people need places to live, and the art of like building a SaaS product, which is technology, is just the same thing in real estate. You're building SaaS, which is like, apartments as a service or single family homes as a service. And it's like you are a service provider for homes that are so important to these people's lives. It's the biggest decision that they make. So like you can build a whole business model to go out and say, I'm going to build a really great service business to provide housing in this market, raise the money and go do it. However, you and I both know that not everyone goes into it with those concrete plans. They fall into this career. And you just made a really great inference, which was like, yeah, and then you got this broker and he maybe has one employee and he's having a tough time letting go of things. This empowerment philosophy, which is like letting somebody else own something and not have you be the owner of it, I think is like what I've seen is the biggest difference between people who actually make it happen. Have you noticed that too? Is that like a pretty fundamental thing that happens? Like they have to let it go.
I have. I actually, I just got done recording some content yesterday about this. It's it's based out of fear. That's ultimately what you deal with, and a lack of trust. So we believe that anytime you talk about process software not working, you're looking at more than likely one of two issues. It's that we didn't give the team enough training, or that we didn't encourage enough trust in the software. So we try to manage that in a couple different ways for people, and we've seen good success with it. One is my job within the first like 10 days of onboarding a software is to be their team's hype man. Like it is, we're getting on a kickoff call and I'm telling them that I'm here for them. I'm not here for the software, and you're not going to hurt my feelings if something doesn't work and you tear it apart. That's what I'm here for, right? But it's also giving them enough training to know that if something breaks, it's fixable, and that if they click the wrong button, here's how to undo it, and here's real-time proof that integrations work. Here's proof of concept that this when we click this, it goes here, right? And we're not just giving empty promises of zaps and automations and that kind of thing. I've seen that be really helpful. It also, you were talking about like it working well with people who have kind of the end in mind. Sometimes people convolute, they say the word process and they think process software, when that's different than the business function. So if Apply went away tomorrow, your team should still know how to run lease renewals, right? That's the business function. So how we typically qualify people on whether or not we feel like they're in a good position for a process software is, have you worked through how you run your business in general? Do you have a solid foundation of like, this is how we decided 123 Main Street Property Management Company is going to work, right? Your voice, for lack of better words. Because if not, we're going to go in and we're going to try and build it on the fly, which we can do. But if people feel like they're not ready for a process software yet, it's usually because they don't have their processes in place in general. And that's where that documentation goes back.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with this. I think the challenge of these transitions are like, first of all, there's a decision maker who is the founder of a business. They don't have to ask anyone for anything. They're, like you said, I'm holding myself accountable. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to go do this thing. But you can only scale that so far. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, you really have to come up with like, what do I stand for? What's my culture? How am I going to go build? How do I differentiate myself? You have to like really rationalize this and write it down, because the next person who comes in has to be an extension of your value system and your vision and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you make decisions and how you want people to think about things, those processes are not in tech. They're just kind of how you want to run your business. And I find more times than not, like even in my own family business, I don't think we ever got this right, because my dad would never let it go. He was just like so convinced that he needed to be part of it, because I think a lot of his identity was tied up in it. Like he couldn't possibly imagine a day where he couldn't have his fingerprints on everything, but that also held the whole business back. Like if as a result of that, we could never get past anything, because he was the ultimate final stakeholder.
Yep.
And it drove us all crazy to the point where none of us wanted to work in the family business.
Yeah.
So,
I get it. I my mom was the opposite, but I dealt with some of that. She was like, get it off my plate. I don't care. Do something with it. But I remember, there was a time where we were working through renewals, and it used to be, my team would kick off the process, verify that they wanted to renew the tenant, and then I would pull comps because I was the agent. And then we kind of went from there, and I gave it back to them to manage the renewal right after the comps were pulled, but we changed it to where we created parameters for the team to operate within, predetermined comps, if you will. And I stepped out of it, and it was fantastic for everybody. We moved twice as fast because, on the 6th of the month, I would get 50 tasks at once to run comps for all these properties. And now it would take me days, right? And it's all hinged on me, as opposed to the team being able to just operate autonomously, share work. That was a huge breakthrough for us. So even if, if you're listening to this and you're not broker owner, maybe you're, property manager, are there things that you can give to your team to be able to operate without you there? Because then, like, what happens if you go on vacation? Renewals, it can't just wait for 2 weeks till you get back, right? So those are some things to think about.
well, you're talking about something that is a really good segue into just like the idea of the resident experience being improved by designing it better, and how process design directly impacts how, the customer feels about, our business. I think I've read a lot of stuff you post online, but residents don't just want fast responses. They want predictable, consistent experiences. It's the Uber Eats, DoorDash world where I got to know where that delivery is at any given moment. I mean, it's fascinating, the world that we've created through technology, but how does process design ensure that residents get the same level of service regardless of who they talk to and who they interact with? Because you just gave the example like, hey, you can't hold up renewals for being on vacation. So how does that process design really make sure that we nail it?
Yeah. An easy win is things like email templates. If your company doesn't already have a written brand voice as a part of, like, if you have your logo, you have your colors, that kind of thing, that's great. But a brand voice of like, this is how our team communicates. This is how we communicate with clients. This is how we communicate with applicants. This is how we communicate with vendors. Keywords to use, words to not use. And then you can put them in templates. You can ask AI, like, hey, I need templates. We actually have a tool that we give out to our clients. I need a template for a lease renewal. It's going to the owner about, this is the rent amount we recommend. This is the company's brand voice. Write it in that way, right? You can build ChatGPTs around that one just for your team. That was one of the like first AI tools that I ever implemented for my parents' company. Was we made a custom GPT and like fed it all of our information about our company. That's an easy unlock. Besides that, as soon as you get into a process software, standardization is what's going to happen, because everyone's going to run it the same way. What you have to be careful about is that 1% of, things that they fall out of the process, or things that maybe break the process that we didn't build for. the the notion, I think there was a movement like maybe 3 or 4 years ago where we realized as an industry our fiduciary duty to our clients, right, and to owners, and that was an important recognition because I think we had gotten away from that. But I feel like sometimes we've swung the pendulum so far that we don't recognize our service provider duty to the residents. It's like you said, like property management is the only industry where you're dealing with one person's income and asset and another person's housing. That those are valuable things. They're also very emotionally driven parts of people's lives. And so being able to train your team on, personality types, communication, de-escalation skills, things like that, process can't solve for that. That's a culture thing.
I love that. And I also, you brought up something that I was like, oh, I got to talk about this one. But it's, you build out these processes and you're talking about the 1% exception, but I think a lot of people also go into process design with you or anybody within their organization. Like, for example, if they're going to build it themselves and they're like, I did it, I'm done, don't need to touch that again. But is process design inherently a living, breathing organism that should have a feedback loop? Like, how do I think about my process design? Is it like set it and forget it, or is it constantly need to be tended to?
So your process should be a set it and forget it. The the ideal outcome version of that process. Yes. Like we should not be constantly tweaking how we run applications, right? Like by the time we figure it out and make it good, that should work well. What will always be flexible is the offshoots, right? Of, well, what if they're like this? And like, especially if you're a younger company, you're going to be like in discovery for the first 3 to 4 years. I remember the first time we processed a military order where someone had to move out because they got military orders. We didn't have a process for that because we'd never done it before. I remember the first time, unfortunately, a resident died and we had to process and move out that way. That's all stuff that, like,
Right.
you're not going to see into the future. We can't build that off of assumptions. We have to actually live it. So yes, we should have, I like quarterly reviews of just checking in on things, making sure stuff works, automations that we might want to add. If you hire a new employee, that's a great time to do it. If you onboard a new software, that's a great time to do it. But I think quarterly or even twice a year is a great way to just have opportunity to say, hey, is there anything that's happened in the last 6 months that we need to make sure is accounted for? I've seen a lot of changes recently with a great change, but a lot of Section 8 housing authorities are moving to like online platforms. So I have processes that I've created for people where it's like, mail the notice to the housing provider that we don't have to do that anymore, right? So it's positive changes, but if things like that happen, you would want to go back and adjust those.
Yeah. And I think what you're also talking about is that inherently most people have documented their processes at some point. Whether they call them SOPs or whatever they want to call them, they've documented them. And there are going to be exceptions. And I think you said it best, which is like, you don't really want to re-engineer the whole thing every year or even every quarter, but there are going to be learnings. And just like AI needs us to feed it information, our processes need to keep getting better from the things we're learning as a result of running them. Because if you're doing something over and over again and it keeps breaking, that's an opportunity to go fix it, right? And so it's a chance to go back and look at it and be like, is there something wrong with the way I designed this, and how do we fix this? This is actually a really great segue into something which I was really kind of holding back on asking you because you brought it up, but you've often said that you feel more like these days you're a product manager than you are a project manager or a system architect. And I think that's fantastic because when I look at my career, nobody taught me product management. I didn't go to a product management institute. I was an entrepreneur that just learned process design and product design by just doing. But tell me a little bit about how you feel these days, like you're more doing product design than you are implementation per se. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so a lot of it stemmed from, one of the things that we guarantee our clients is a lifetime. If it breaks it, we fix it. So if we build something and an integration deprecates or whatever, something happens and what we originally built no longer works, we will go in and fix it at any time. We won't like make new designs. We won't be a part of those, quarterly audits that I recommend. But if something that we originally designed no longer works, we'll fix it. And that created a need for like a ticketing system. Like, I mean, like a IT support style situation. Because we would have, bugs. We would have people come in and say like, hey, this used to work, now it's not. Or, feature requests and processes that we build, ideas, feedback loops. We'll have people send us screenshots of stuff. And we are consultative in what we do, but on the back end, like, we're developing a no-code software. Like, that's basically what we're doing. We're using other people's builds. We're using, tools like Apply and creating a little mini system inside of it, or multiple mini systems inside of it. And so the way we think about it, if we're working with a client who is using, Apply, for example, our goal is to make the little mini systems work. That's on us. And I have had to learn what's my responsibility versus what's Apply's responsibility. So, if the integration with Rentvine is getting wonky, that's not my job. I'm not going to try and make it my job. But what is important is that I can communicate it effectively to the people who can manage it. So I've learned a lot about how people triage things. I've learned a lot about, how to effectively communicate a bug to people so that people understand exactly, what's happening, how often it's happening, the urgency of what's happening, and who it's impacting, right? And if it's just in certain iterations or if it's across the board. So we try and train our teams and our clients even on that. We use Rent Engine's co-founder, actually, he put me onto this software. It's called jam.dev, and it is screenshots and screen recording. It's like Loom, but they don't have to send you the link to it. It just goes into a folder, and then we use Asana for our own project management, and it creates a task in Asana for us. So little stuff like that, we run sprints. That's how we work. That's been our philosophy. It's worked well so far.
Well, I think said another way, that because you're implementing so many different types of technology and you have to understand how they talk to each other and how to implement them, where they break, where it's one software breaking versus another, you basically had to become a product manager. You had to understand multiple products. You had to understand their touch points, their integrations. You had to build a way of managing issues that come up. You really have put yourself in a really interesting role, not just being a process architect, but also having to be like a deep and well thought out kind of usability engineer too, because you're designing usability not only for, you gave another parallel. I'll come back to it just to tie it back. You said, wow, like as property managers, we're in this interesting situation where we got to like be custodians of like an asset for an owner and a home for a renter. And God, that's a unique position to be in. But as a process architect, like what you do, you're doing the same thing. You're having to like manage like the property management company's desires of what they want to accomplish, the technology companies that they have to work with in this middle tier, which, basically has to be designed that is part technology talking to each other, part just like the user journey. And I know that you do a lot with thinking about the user journey and constantly kind of like challenging like how to like build it the best way. You also have thrown out tools that you just mentioned. I know I see you hacking a lot on LinkedIn, playing with AI tools. And I think that's what makes you super unique, is that not only are you trying to do what a normal solution provider would do, but you're also trying to find ways to do it faster. And like, I don't know if this is supposed to be out in the wild there, but you're two people. How are you possibly doing this with two people? Like, you're like literally You're the walking case study of what I hear when I go out to dinner with my entrepreneur friends who are running large software companies and saying, I just figured out how to do this with 1/3 of the employees, but you're an embodiment of that already because you started your company this way.
Yeah.
How do you do so much with 2 people?
Is barely an answer. We,
Maybe.
um, so, a lot of effort went in the last 2 years to getting our own systems in place. We take our own medicine. We have a lot of stuff documented. We don't refer to it all the time, but we know this is how we operate, right? I have a very flexible team. Saul is an incredible person. He does whatever I need him to do whenever I need him to do it, which is it's a unique quality, and I'm very grateful for him. Part of what we've worked on, there's kind of two conversations we could have on just the execution of how we work with our clients. What we've recently implemented, I'm in love with it. It's made both of our lives so much easier. Because part of what we work through internally is like UI, like how the user is actually going to interface with what we work on. I mean, again, it goes back to like, I feel like a software manager. So little stuff like, hey, when I'm talking about certain stages in Apply, these are the colors that I want you to use, right? Or when this is how we label things. This is like, we make sure we capitalize stuff. That stuff, it comes into play because that all negatively or positively interacts with how the client uses it. So when we document a process for a client, I'll share because I've taught some of my clients how to do this for their own internal people. We have the SOP itself, okay, which is it should not mention the software that you're using. I don't think that a good SOP should have anything to do with the software you're using. So we're not going to say like in Apply, click on the renewals board, right? We're not going to say that. We're going to process through, if anything, your property accounting software of where to manage that, because there's a good chance that's not going to change, and process the renewal as if the software didn't exist, right? We're going to talk about rules. We're going to talk about conditional logic there, who's responsible for which tasks, that sort of thing. Then we have a different document, which is the user experience in the tool. So if you're starting up a renewals board in Apply, which buttons do you click? Where do you go? What should it look like? What custom fields should you fill out? That's a different document. The third document is for our internal use only, and that's what we call our build sheet. And that is the email templates I want used, the custom fields I want created, the mirror fields where we're bringing stuff in from, the automations, the triggers for the automations. That's what Saul and I manage. So I set that up for him, and he builds most of it. He's almost entirely back end and I'm almost entirely front end. I do a lot of the process design just because I have a little bit more experience on the consultative side of things. And then he executes, and then I'll give it back to the client. So that's how we operate. It's worked really well. We've done that since a little bit before the beginning of the year, and it's been fantastic. Besides that, we go by our own medicine. Everything lives in Asana. That's our world. If it doesn't live in Asana, it doesn't exist. That's our project tool. For our clients on the tinkering side, I did get OpenClaw up and running for myself. If you're not familiar with it, it's a fully functioning AI agent. You can set it up a trillion different ways to do a trillion different things. There's lots of Reddit posts about it. Go look it up. But I did that this weekend. That was cool. I've been working on some Chrome extensions that I want to release soon. One of them is it's a Kanban view for another process software for Lead Simple. Because I think sometimes people, they try and move softwares just because one looks different than the other. So our goal is to help people in all aspects. So whether it's going from software to software, whether it's helping one software get better, I want, in the same breath, I have people at Apply that, they use Apply and they want to see things in more of like a line view. And so I've seen it go, we're working on a couple different things, but like plugins is a route that we're looking at. Yeah, those are a few things.
You said in something you said online was that Chat GPT was like your first love and Claude is like your forever love or something like that. I don't know exactly what the words were that you used, but for people who are listening to this and hearing things like OpenClaw and what are those things, I think it's really interesting that, there's this genre now of technology that people are using that can be programmed to manage their life. I think there's some fear that comes into that as well, because you have a scenario where, you're giving AI so much of your information and it's sitting on a computer. Like I looked at, OpenClaw when it first came out a while back, and it keeps getting better. But like the fear was like, oh my God, I have to give this thing so much information for it to be useful. And it's like the fear that comes in with that. But it's changing, and it's changing so rapidly, and it seems to have so much promise. Tell me a little bit about how you envision our industry, because like there's a pretty staggering stat of number of companies that are like embracing property management companies that are embracing AI. And I think their impression of AI is like, responding to an email for me or whatever. But where do you think AI is going in the industry? Like, how do you see the future for, that tool for the everyday property manager?
Yeah. I think it's like a black hole, right? Like you stare into it and it is so customizable. You kind of just shy away from it altogether. It's like looking at like a whiteboard and you don't even know where to start. I think we're going to see the biggest unlock with companies who expose their APIs. Because going back to like the OpenClaw idea, like I get the most success from using that with companies, like my own softwares where I can read and write into it, right? Like I can see all of my data and I can put data into it. So that's going to be important, because then I can be on my phone and say, hey, go add a charge to this tenant's ledger, or go check on this work order, or what are the 10 most overdue lease renewals that I have, or things like that. So continued prompt-based working, and like that's cool. I have seen, one thing I've been really excited with what Apple's working on is your outbound AI agent capabilities. I think more stuff like that's going to get really interesting really fast. I think we're also going to probably see regulation around it pretty quickly. So that'll be interesting to watch that shake out. But the idea that, a tech forward company used to be really cool if they like sent a form and then the form got filled out and the form got put back into your source, right? A crazy idea that you guys are now executing on is that form being a phone call that an AI agent is filling out for them while they're on the call, and it's in real time doing stuff. That when I first heard about that blew my mind. I think
Yeah,
that's going to be a huge value add.
it's interesting too, because we're ready to go gun ho on it. And then there's all these laws about robo dialers. So we had to like train our customers to be like, you need to put this in the lease agreement, because if you start using it while it's so fantastic, the penalties are pretty stiff, like you said about the regulation.
Yeah.
I want to double click into one other idea. You said that you love hacking on these tools that open the door, that move data in and out. I agree with you. I think this bold new future is going to be the ability to, essentially have unfeathered access to your data and do what you want to do with it. I love that you're building stuff. I think that's fantastic. You're an embodiment of what I think the future looks like today, which is like, I'm curious, I'm going to teach myself this, I'm going to go and hack on it. I don't think everyone who watches this has maybe the same desire, but the fact that that you can access these doors and start to build things, and that you don't even have to be technical. You just said it yourself. You just have to know how to prompt, and you have to have a general curiosity.
Yeah.
One thing that you have spoken about in the past is like how this idea of like one platform doesn't really work, because ultimately might fail you by not being best of breed in all things. And I, there was a time when I felt that way too, because I grew up in an era where like, RealPage, they were like massive ecosystems and you had to take whatever they gave you. And I
Mhm.
was the poster child of like, hey, you need other products. They can't be everything to you.
Mhm.
But now I feel like we swung the pendulum, like you said, to the fully opposite direction now, where there's a myriad of great tools, but there are a
Mhm.
bunch of point solutions.
Mhm.
And while Madeline is super crafty and smart, can figure out how to integrate them all, like the average person is spending copious amount of money on Zapier and trying to figure out how to stitch them all together.
Mhm.
What's your read on the app sprawl problem? Give me the pros and cons. Like, are you still pro pick best of breed, or what's your take on it?
So I am pro pick best of breed, to use your words, and I'm okay if that answer is in a one all in one solution. So it's not. I don't find like a security or ethical or anything like an issue with any of it. I think it's more of I just want what's best, right? I do think with how AI works, because it's just it's data configuration. The more data you can give it, the more you're going to be able to use it for. For example, I have in the last 2 weeks, I have given my AI agent more access to more things slowly because I want it to do more stuff. Like that's just the reasonable outcome of saying, hey, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you like prompt your AI to do something and it's like, sorry, I can't do that. And then you're like, well, crap, like, what do I need to give you access to do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
so,
Total bait and switch.
yeah, um, I I have found user buy-in to be better when you have more tools in one place. I do think though, like there used to be a social complaint of like I don't want to have to switch from tabs to tabs. This might be the Gen Z in me, but I've never had that issue. Like that's not I don't care. And I don't know if that notion is going to go away or not. I think it's more so of is the tool I'm using going to get the job done. And if that's in an all-in-one solution, so be it. I mean, we actually to take property management out of it. We just onboarded with HubSpot to be our CRM. And I'm now seeing that they have invoicing and they have calendar management and all kinds of stuff that we use our own point solutions for. And so now I'm evaluating and seeing, okay, does Calendly or HubSpot perform this function better? The winner's going to win, and we're going to keep using that one, right? I don't think that it's necessarily black and white.
Yeah, and there's a couple elements you mentioned. Like there's a user adoption element you have to consider. Some people don't care, some people do care. There's the cost element of it, like just by standardizing on a platform, sometimes
You
the
will
cost.
likely save cost if it's all in one place. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's a cost element. I also think you also mentioned it, like I struggle, and this feeling like you're trying to get AI to do something, but long chats expire and then I got to start a new one. And all of a sudden, because my data is in like the other chat, I'm like, oh no, I got to
Yep.
start over. So I think like AI thrives on centralized information
Yep.
and steady streams of it, and in a way that it can compact it and make quick decisions. As a company that's, actively working on so many AI initiatives, like one of the things we struggle with a lot is like, that's data that needs to be like really accessible because it's going to be in a voice and it's got to be like bang, you get it right away, versus like that can take a second, let the
Mm-hmm.
hamster wheel run and then give you the response. So but when you're running through different systems and it takes a minute for it to get it, like I'm coding on Claude and it's like, let me download those transcripts, and I'm like, I'm going to grab a coffee, I'll be back in
Right.
an
Yeah.
hour because I know you're not finishing this anytime soon.
Yeah.
So that's
The
another side effect of it.
the place where I see certain point solutions being helpful is actually for them to act as a bridge between more other softwares that are more locked down. So, if
Yeah.
there's some softwares where you have to be an integration partner in order to get access to the API, as a vendor, I'm gonna probably point my clients in the direction of whatever software has the better connection to that other software. right? Because then we can do more cool stuff with it. So, I think about it in that sense. And, even if you are not the holder of the data, I want to work with whoever's exposing that data the best and organizing it the best.
100%. I mean, it's no secret that we've, worked really closely with the Remfine team, and it's partially because they embody the same mentality I had with
Yeah.
Propertyware, which is like, it's your data. You should be able to do whatever you want with it.
Right.
And, there are other companies that may have APIs, but they're super limited on what they can do, and they charge extra for them. And then they're super restrictive, and people get really frustrated. And then they want to, like, I've seen actually very large companies switch just because
Yeah.
they want to have a better integration with all the things. And they want to go to you and be like, can you build something for me? And you're like, yeah, but not on that platform.
Yeah. My
So
parents actually moved.
you said something, I want to come back to it. You said something that I really liked. And I know that you probably have a hot take on this, which is AI stopped doing something for you and then was like, but if you give me this data, do you feel like we're at a place where we're trading convenience for freedom? I constantly wonder this because I keep hitting these like paywalls with my life with AI, where I'm like, I would have told you 100% I will never do that at some point. And then I realize the convenience and I'm like, okay, I give it away. But then at some point, I feel like we're as a society becoming so lazy, and like we've traded off that convenience for like the freedoms of things that all of a sudden we lose. Like there are large swaths of people that are coming out of college now that are no longer accessing entry level jobs because people are like, I'll use AI for that. And like, oh wow, look at Claudebot. It's like some hacker tool right now. That'll be like the entry level jobs gone. Do you feel like that convenience is going to come back and essentially deny large swaths of our industry jobs that were available to them, or is this more pipe dream?
I'll give a different hot take. So I I'm not sure that I would want to hold a job where the tasks were so menial that AI could easily do them. And like that was the whole
I
job.
like that.
I think that people have more purpose and value than that. I've also seen a lot of young people come out of college and learn how to vibe code and start successful SaaS or consultant companies because they thought they were going to be software engineers and now they're not. And that career choice didn't used to exist like 4 years ago, right? I don't, if we believe that, you know, capitalism is going to capitalism, I think
Right.
that there will obviously be a trade-off. But if you are open to exploring new horizons and not take on a victim mentality, I don't see this being a downside for most people. The only thing that I ever pause on is security, and data sharing and that sort of thing. That's where I have more walls up.
Nobody knows the answer, right?
Right. Bank account, social security numbers, who's listening on my phone, is my, I have smart light bulbs on in my bedside lamps, and I'm like, they could have a voice chip in them and I would never know. Like they could be constantly listening and I would never know. It's stuff like that I see more of the trade-off than job security. And that might be short-sighted, but that's my take.
No, that's a great take. I agree with you. I think these conveniences may come at a high price for us, and we don't know what they are quite yet. But I loved the take on, hey, listen, like if they're taking that job, I don't even want that job. Like, why would I want that? But I mean, full disclosure, like my first job out of college, I sorted faxes off a fax machine and answered a hotline. It was terrible. And
Yep.
I got paid nothing for it.
Yep.
So I think you're coming from a generation where like you guys are thinking bigger and are not willing to accept certain norms that like we had to accept when I was coming out of college.
I think it also points to what I see being more and more of a gig economy, like people having multiple jobs that are all kind of freelance trade situations. We've already seen job hopping being more of a common thing and it not being like a how could you situation. I think that AI lends itself to that kind of career style as well.
So, in closing, one of the things that you recently just did was you rebranded your business, piece through process. And I think anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure they got a lot out of just understanding like your philosophy on process building and whatnot. But like, when I said you were one of the rising stars in the industries, is because you are also very much an entrepreneur and you created this business out of thin air, and you're treating it like a startup in a sense, and building technology and doing the things that you're doing. But I also love that you're into branding, and that it was important to you to give your brand a whole new voice. Talk to me about what peace through process means to you.
Yeah. I spent Christmas break wondering, like, I think every business owner has this at least once every couple of years. Like, why am I doing this? Why, what am I doing? Why am I here? What's the purpose? Right. And I went back to a memory of the first time I myself realized that processes created peace in my own life. And it was when I realized that I no longer had, you'll appreciate this. I didn't know what was going on with every property that I managed anymore. That used to be like almost a point of pride of like, I could list off my entire rent roll and see everything going on in a visual sense, right? And I realized one day that because we had implemented process software, I didn't know that anymore. And it kind of freaked me out for a second. Like I was like, oh my gosh, am I like losing my touch, right? And I went and looked at the process software and made sure everything was going the way that it should, and realized like I could go back to bed. I didn't have to go check on a bunch of things. Everything was running exactly the way that it should. And that freed up brain space for, for other thoughts. I could think about other things. My team could, go home and not wake up in a cold sweat worrying if they sent a lease or a lockbox. That that's the thing that gets me up in the morning. And when we talk about creating wins for our clients, most people are not going to adopt a software just because their boss told them to. Some people will, but most people need a bigger reason behind it. So when we're clarifying the why to our clients to get buy-in on a mass scale, I tell stories like that, and we get lots of giggles out of it, like, oh yeah, I've done that. But then we check back in a few months, and they're like, I don't know how I did it any different. On like a assistant leasing manager role. It's not just the CEO, right? It's everybody. And that's what we go after. That's why we're there. So yeah, we create peace through process. We think that peace is a designed experience. It's not something that occurs by happenstance. And so we want to help company owners and teammates of all kinds create peace, because by default, property managers, they're peacemakers for their clients. Like they give peace of mind to their clients, and we want to do the same thing for them.
Gotta love that. That's it's a lot more thoughtful than I thought it was. More like hey, I came up with this tagline. It actually, it goes back to your origin story, which is what you did for your mom, and now you did it for yourself, and
Yeah.
now you're giving yourself the space to innovate. And I see, and it's I think I see it in the way that you're able to like let the core business run and still innovate and find new ways to stay relevant and push the envelope. Like the fact that you took a weekend and installed some crazy AI hack just to see where it's going. That's an embodiment of like having the peace in your business that you could do that and that you
Yeah.
could explore that. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, let's just to close it out. If you had one piece of really great advice, I'm a property manager, I'm listening to this and I want to level up things in 2026. What are 3 steps I could take, and what can I really realistically expect to accomplish in just, getting started?
It's a great question. Um, I have found a lot of success helping people understand software and AI in general simply by showing them the back end computer work. And that sounds so like annoying and complex, but it's really not. If you go, especially if you use a tool like Claude, I use Claude more than I do ChatGPT these days. You can actually watch it run Python, like code as it thinks. In real time, you start, in the human brain starts seeing patterns, right? They're like, oh, when the code looks like that, they're doing this, right? And I can't read code. I don't know what it means for the most part, but I now can understand snippets of things, which gives me the ability to prompt the AI better, because I can be more. It's not just, make it clearer, build it this way, write the document this way, because I'll use it to create documents and things too. But I think if we go back to like our MySpace roots, where everyone knew like basic HTML, that would probably be a big win for most people, is understanding the code beyond what just they see on their screens. That's probably a really niche take, but I don't know. I found it to be helpful.
That's helpful. I think what you're saying is like, hey, you don't have to be super technical, but be curious. I mean, it's what served you well.
More than just the consumerism of like prompting the AI and getting whatever you want. Like, think of it more as like a tool. And for most people, they want to understand some level of what the tool is actually doing. Just be curious about that, and you'll go far.
So stay curious, create peace through process, and prosper. Thank you so much, Madeline. We've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.